Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Your name's Julia, right? All right.
Um, Thank you so much for joining us today. We're having you here today just to hear you talk a little bit about your experience at CCIR. So to
Mhm.
start us off, can you just introduce yourself a little bit? Where you currently go to school or what year you're in, and also what subject you did your research in?
Yeah, so my name's Veer Gaur. I'm a sophomore at Radnor High School, and I did my research in biology, or essentially like cell development.
Okay, so tell us more about, cell development. Did you take a Future Scholar course or was it a one-on-one course?
No, it was just the one where we worked in a cohort, so future scholar, I believe. So
Okay.
yeah, my project was essentially on epigenetics impact on breast cancer outcomes. So epigenetics sounds like a really big word, and it's not actually that bad. So what epigenetics is, it's like the study of outside factors and how they impact your genes. So essentially that could be something as simple as like if you smoke, if you drink, or if you exercise and see how that affects your reaction to certain things. Like for example, I studied breast cancer. So, say you have breast cancer and you smoke, I was able to figure out that, hey, you're going to have this much worse of a prognosis. Or if you, excuse me, are, not drinking as much alcohol, you're going to have this much worse of a prognosis, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, so you're looking more at the prognosis than you are at the etiology.
Yeah, essentially.
Interesting. Did you come into the program knowing exactly that this is what you wanted to do your research on, or was it more of a, yeah, walk us through that
Yeah.
process?
So when I first joined the program, I wanted to go into more, I still wanted to go into cancer and learn more about that, but I originally wanted to learn about stem cells. And in my program, they did teach me a lot about stem cells, and I still am super interested in those. But I learned a lot about epigenetics, and I found that super interesting. That stuff you can do in your daily life is able to actually have such huge effects on, things I used to consider to be like, unapproachable or unchangeable, like your rate of getting cancer.
So was it, how did you make that transition from stem cells to epigenetics? Was that part of a discussion that you guys had, or was it part of a reading that you were assigned? How did you make that, pivot?
So that pivot came from just like a class discussion, as you said. We were learning about stem cells, and then my mentor, Dr. Koskan, he was like, "Hey, this is also another super interesting field of study called epigenetics, and this is how this affects that." And I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah. Tell us more about just the class environment in general, and was it more lecture based? Was it more discussion based? And what was it like, in between class time?
So I think that it did have a good amount of lecture, but I believe that we had as well like a pretty solid amount of discussion where were able to talk with our mentors, with the TA, with the rest of our cohort. And I think that really just fostered an environment where we were able to really spread our curiosity and understand what this did or like whatever this mechanism did. And as for like in between class time, I mean, what do you mean by that? Just like what we
Yeah, so in between class time, did you go to office hours? Did you
Oh,
go to
yeah.
TA sessions? Yeah.
Yeah, so I would go to the TA sessions and the office hours, and I think that was also super helpful because for the majority of my research, I've been working with my TA on this, and I think without those sessions, going and talking to her, understanding what she wanted to, like what she was able to help me with, I wouldn't have been able to get as far in my research as I have.
Yeah, and that sort of leads me to my next question, which is, did you go into this class already having, a strong background in biology, or, were you pretty much, like a newly exposed to this field? And if you were newly exposed, then did you find it hard to keep up with class material?
So I've been like going with biology for a couple years now. Like I've been to a couple summer camps where they taught us a little bit of techniques for research, a little bit of surgery and stuff like that. But I think the depth at which they covered things in CCIR's course was definitely a lot harder. And I had to read outside of class. I had to go in and ask questions. And that's why I think it was so good because you were really truly learning about that subject. It wasn't something like, say, you're in like a school biology class where sure you're learning things, but it's not nearly as in depth.
Right. So it felt less like a biology 101, 101 class and more something that was, you were actually able to dive deeper into a very specific area that you were
Yeah.
interested in. And so within that depth, were you comfortable with writing your own research paper? Was that also something that the TA was able to help you with?
So yeah, for the pretty much most part, I wrote my own research paper, but I would send it back to the TA for like edits and suggestions on like stuff like grammar and just like where I should focus what I'm saying. And but I mean, other than that, I wrote the paper on my own essentially.
Yeah, and taking into consideration, the class time, the TA time, and office hours times and reading time, how much time would you say you spent on a weekly basis dedicated to just this program?
So each of the classes for because we had a different schedule for the like curriculum based part of this, we had 2 hours of office hour or 2 hours of the learning session and then 2 hours of office hours separated by an hour in between. And for that hour in between, I'd be researching stuff on my own. So that would be 5 hours. And then throughout the week, I'd also be reading, I'd be doing my homework, I'd be checking up on things. So about another 2 or 3 hours. But that did it fluctuated when we got to the research point because then we'd be emailing my TA back and forth. We'd be, going over new iterations of my paper and so on. But I would say it stayed about 8 hours a week for the most part. And then in the later stages of the process, I think it's gone down to about 3 or 4 just because I'm not, there's no more TA sessions or, sessions to attend.
So it sounds like the bulk of the work really happened more towards the beginning and the middle, where you were collecting all the information and doing a lot of literature review. If you think back to this whole entire process, what would you say was your most fulfilling, I guess, aspect of the program? Even given the workload.
I would say the most fulfilling aspect for me was when we first, like my TA and I first submitted to my journal. Like I saw my paper at the end because I was going over it and I was like, wow, I did that. Because like, normally I don't think of myself as like a great writer or anything, but I felt like I was really able to express what I wanted to say in just a better manner than I thought I could do. So I thought that was like I put in this much work and look at that, I was able to make something good out of it.
Yeah, that almost gave me a little bit of goosebumps because it almost sounds like it was something that was, I guess, at one point in your life, you didn't really think that you would do or be able to do, but then to actually see that like submitting button and then eventually, get it showcased and have people actually read the stuff that you're writing and caring about is super, super cool.
Yeah. So currently we haven't gotten it published yet. We're almost there. We just like we got the submission in, they've sent us feedback. So now I'm getting the second iteration, but I was like this close. So it's like I'm almost there. I just got to push through and you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that brings me to my next point, which is this program not only, I guess, gave you the opportunity to dive deeper into biology, but also taught you what's happening in the backstage of academia, right? What does it look like to do research? What does it look like to even get submission feedback? And this whole publication process. So if you think back to everything that you went through, what do you think is your biggest takeaway, like a transferable skill that you would be able to carry with you throughout college?
I would honest as corny as it sounds, I would say it's the perseverance to keep looking through literature, to keep diving deep to understand. Because for like the average research paper, you're getting 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 sources, and all these are different. These are all their own papers. Some are big, some are small, but all of these you need to go through, you need to sort through on your own. You need to determine, hey, is this, going to help me or no, maybe it's not. And I think that just collection of data aspect of being able to push through and be like, all right, I got to get this done. This is going to be worth it. I think that was a really good skill I've learned from this.
And was this the first time that you were doing, such densely of a literature review?
Yeah, 100%.
And, so then how did you even get to learn different strategies of doing it?
What do you mean? Just like of like reading the literature?
In terms of where do you even go out to find these articles and then going through, the bottom and organizing, were you given any tips or did you kind of have to figure it out by yourself?
So my mentors gave me a couple sites to look from like PubMed, Google Scholar, and stuff like that. And from there, what I would do is I would filter it through keywords, which they also taught me how to do. And from there, I would pick a bunch of the articles I liked, and I would essentially take the URL of one I liked, stick it into Noodle Tools, and then I would get like 10 at a time. And then after that, once I got my 10, I would go back in, read all of them, except the ones I didn't like, put them away, keep the ones I liked, and I just keep going until I had about like 80 or 90.
Wow, so you're like for your paper that you were writing, how many sources did you use?
Off the top of my head, it's between 80 and 100. It's like
Wow. Yeah, so that's
fun
really
stuff.
it's really incredible because that's 80 to 100 articles that you've included as reference in your paper, but I'm sure that, the stuff that you put to the side are even way more than what you included, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I guess if I could, summarize this into a suggestion for future students is just be ready to do a lot of reading, and this really also tests your time management skills and also your organizational skills for sure.
Yeah. And actually, once going back to the skills point, that's another huge one. I'm a huge procrastinator and I'm really messy. And I think this was another thing I learned how to, be able to categorize things and be like, okay, well, I have this part of my epigenetics down. Maybe this part's next. So that again was really helpful. But yeah, I think for like new applicants to the program, you should definitely, be ready to have some nights where you're just gonna get a little less sleep.
Yeah, but like you said, it'll all be worth it in the end.
Yeah, 100%.
How has this, program or this process informed your, I guess, college application decisions? Has it helped you narrow down the field of study you want to go into, or even different colleges that you want to apply to?
So right now I haven't gone, like too much into exactly where I want to go to college, but in terms of field of study, I've definitely been able to narrow it down to like oncology, cancer, and more stem cell based stuff, which I want to go into next. So yeah.
That's really was that something I know that coming into the program you already knew that you wanted to do cancer. So was there like more of a fleshing out of that idea?
Yeah, for sure. Because when I came into the program, I was like, oh, cancer, it sounds cool. But like, through the program, I was able to really understand like what happens, what this means, and exactly why it's such a complicated problem. Because one of my biggest things is I like really enjoy challenges and solving them. So I was able to appreciate just how large of a problem this is, and that, if you're able to understand, if you're able to learn, you might be able to help get a little bit of this problem done, which could have so much help for, rest of the world.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess moving this all back to your paper, if you could explain, I guess, your findings to us in layman's terms, how
Yeah.
would you summarize what you wrote?
Yeah. So essentially what I was able to discover was that people of like different racial backgrounds, say Hispanics or African American women, they have a worse prognosis and a higher occurrence rate of breast cancer than say white women or Asian women. And this was two main reasons, actually. So, one of them was we discovered that Hispanic women and African American women had naturally higher levels of estrogen, which do lead to increased levels of breast cancer. But also, uh, just the levels of socioeconomic status between the four groups was quite different. And we could see a noticeable trend in how your socioeconomic status could lead to your incidence of breast cancer. Because say you're not able to have the best care in the country, right? If you're not able to afford that care, are you really going to be able to afford to get an early detection scan? Are you going to be able to afford to have the best treatment in the world, right? And those are the sort of things we discovered that, hey, not everyone has this best access to everything. And that's just a huge reason why we get a lot more mortality in these groups compared to other groups.
Hmm. So it's really a research that isn't only, remaining at the theoretical level, but it has a lot of real life applications. And, just from what you have described, it has its medical impact, but I feel like it also has political and policy level impact on how to, uplift those communities so that we can sort of level out the playing field in that
Yeah.
sense. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that with us. My last question for you is, if there's something that you wish you would have known before coming into the program, what might that be?
I would have told myself that or if I would have wished that I knew how much work it would be, but how rewarding it would be at the end. Like I mentioned before, like it wasn't an easy process, go out, stay in those TA sessions, go to everyone, make sure I'm getting my research right, I'm saying the right things in my paper. That wasn't easy, but I think that what I got out of it, that it was just rewarding enough that, if you put your head down, get through it, you take the opportunity to learn, that you'll be able to get through really anything with it.
Honestly, it helps us end on such a positive note, and it's so hopeful. Thank you so much for sharing it with us. Is there anything that I didn't get to ask you today that you would love to share?
Nothing too much. I mean, yeah.
All right, great. Thank you so much and have a great day.
All right, you too. Thank you.